The wind howled like a wild beast through the trees, rattling the branches and slamming against the old wooden cabins that dotted the forest's edge. Thick clouds rolled in overhead, suffocating the afternoon sun and casting everything in an eerie, bluish hue. Thunder cracked across the sky, its echo bouncing off the distant mountains like a warning. The river below, usually a gentle, babbling stream that lured animals and hikers alike, had turned violent, churning, black, and swollen with storm runoff. Debris, branches, leaves, and broken logs raced downstream like panicked creatures fleeing some unseen terror. The storm had come fast, furious, and without mercy. Half submerged in the center of the chaos was a massive bear. Its fur, once thick and brown, was soaked and matted to its enormous frame. Its body shuddered from the cold and exertion. One powerful forepaw was pinned beneath a twisted tree limb that had snagged between two rocks. The bear roared, a raw, desperate cry that echoed into the forest, loud enough to make birds burst from the trees in fright. Its eyes were wide with fear, nostrils flaring as water surged around it, splashing over its snout and making each breath a battle. It clawed at the rocks with its free paw, muscles straining, but it couldn't get leverage. The river was too strong. It howled again, a sound that somehow held more than just pain. It carried something human, panic, desperation, a plea. Half a mile away, nestled at the tree line, a small cabin trembled under the weight of the storm. Inside, a woman paced with a flashlight, nervously checking windows. Her husband was out gathering firewood before the storm hit and hadn't yet returned. Power had flickered and died minutes ago, and now her 12-month-old baby had started crying, loud, frantic, and unlike any cry she had ever heard from him before. She tried rocking him, cradling him, singing softly into his ear, but he twisted in her arms and screamed even louder. Then, without warning, he wriggled free from her grasp and dropped to the floor, crawling furiously toward the front door. "Eli," she said in confusion. "No, no, sweetheart, not now." He didn't stop. The baby reached the door and started slapping at it with his small hands, crying harder, louder, like he was calling to someone, or something. A deafening crack of thunder shook the entire cabin. The woman gasped, instinctively turning to check a rear window where a branch had slammed against the glass. It took less than 10 seconds, but when she turned back around, the front door was open, and her baby was gone. Panic exploded in her chest. Outside, wind and rain lashed the trees. The path was nothing but thick mud now, every footprint filling with brown water. She shouted Eli's name, grabbing her coat and boots, fumbling to light the storm lantern as she ran out. Her flashlight's beam cut through the rain, but the forest beyond seemed to swallow the light whole. Meanwhile, down by the river, the bear's strength was failing. Its breathing was shallow. The paw that had thrashed moments ago now hung limp. Water had reached its shoulders. Its dark eyes, clouded with fatigue and defeat, slowly closed. The world went silent in its mind, just the dull throb of cold and the pull of surrender. Then, a soft cry. Not the sound of wind, not thunder, not the groan of the trees. A human cry. The bear's ear twitched. From the forest line, crawling down a slope slick with rain and pine needles, came a tiny figure. A baby, so small he could barely keep balance on his hands and knees. His onesie was soaked, stained with mud. His eyes, wide and locked on the river, carried no fear, just a strange, urgent purpose. He reached the riverbank, sat up, and stared directly at the bear. For a long, impossible moment, neither moved. Lightning streaked across the sky, illuminating both figures, the massive creature trapped in death's grip, and the tiny child who had come through the storm, alone, as if summoned by something ancient. The bear opened its eyes again, and saw him. The baby tilted his head, then raised one hand slightly, his fingers twitching toward the water. A tiny whimper escaped his mouth, followed by a louder cry. But it wasn't just distress. It was a response, a mirror. A call returned. The bear shifted. A low, rumbling sound vibrated in its chest. Not a growl, not pain. Something softer. In that instant, there was a connection, wordless, primal, and deeply unsettling. It felt like recognition, like something remembered from long ago, though neither of them could understand how or why. The rain intensified. The river surged, foam and water crashing against the bear's head. It let out a final gasp. Its eyes never left the baby's. Then it slipped beneath the surface. Gone. The baby let out a piercing cry, shrill and furious. He crawled forward again until his tiny feet dipped into the icy current. He didn't flinch. The river tugged gently at his legs, and still, he stared at the place where the bear had vanished. Behind him, through the storm and forest, the faint sound of his mother's voice called out, breathless and breaking. Eli! Eli! She was close, but not close enough. And her son, barefoot, rain-soaked, unmoving, was crawling into the river. The downpour had turned the mountain road into a muddy labyrinth, but the villagers braved it anyway. Word had spread like wildfire. A baby had been seen near the river, alone, crawling into the rapids. Old Marco, the fisherman who lived closest to the river bend, had heard the frantic banging on his door. A neighbor, soaked to the bone, gasping for breath. A baby, on the rocks, near the bend. That was all it took. By the time Marco reached the riverbank, 3 others were there, screaming over the roar of the water. Someone pointed, hand trembling. There, by the tree roots. Marco's eyes locked onto a tiny figure, half submerged, clinging to a root like it was the only thing anchoring him to life. The baby's arms flailed weakly. His face bobbed above the current for barely a second at a time before disappearing beneath again. There was no time to hesitate. Marco dropped his jacket, boots still on, and dove into the freezing current. The cold hit like 1,000 knives, but he forced his way forward, kicking hard, letting the river drag him closer to the baby's position. The water fought him, pulling him sideways, but he powered through, grabbing onto a slick branch to redirect himself toward the little boy. Eli's hand broke the surface again, reaching. Marco lunged and caught it just as the baby's head slipped underwater. With one arm wrapped around the child, he turned to swim back and froze. Just ahead, something was moving beneath the water. Large, brown. It broke the surface like a nightmare, a massive head rising slowly, eyes dazed, mouth barely above the current. The bear. Marco gasped, tightening his grip on the baby. For a heartbeat, he expected violence, instinctively raising his arm to shield them both. But the bear didn't strike. It looked past him, at the baby. Then, slowly, painfully, it began to paddle. Its limbs shook with effort, its breath coming in heavy, ragged bursts. Marco watched in disbelief as the animal shifted in the current, dragging itself toward the bank. The river did not go easy on it. At one point, the bear vanished beneath the water, and Marco thought that was the end. But then, there it was again, clawing upward, gasping, pushing forward. And then he saw it. The bear's paw had come free. The twisted limb that had trapped it was gone. Somehow, impossibly, it had found the strength to escape. Marco made it to the edge just as the bear collapsed on the shore a few yards away. The villagers helped pull him and the baby out. Gasps of relief echoed. Someone sobbed. But no one went near the bear. It lay motionless, its great chest heaving. Blood trickled from its leg. Its eyes remained open, barely blinking. Alive, but only just. The baby, wrapped tightly in Marco's arms, suddenly squirmed. He reached out toward the bear, fingers opening and closing. "Keep him back," one of the villagers shouted. "It's not safe." But Eli was insistent, crying, pushing forward again, little arms stretching toward the injured creature. There was no fear in him, only urgency. The mother arrived moments later, breathless, mud-caked and shaking. She grabbed her son, holding him close, tears pouring down her face, her eyes locked on the bear. She froze. Something ancient stirred inside her. 1 year ago, she had been 7 months pregnant and hiking a short forest path she'd walked 100 times. She'd always found it peaceful. That day, a strange calm had hung over everything, as though the woods were holding their breath. A single misstep sent her tumbling, and she remembered hitting her head. Then nothing. They'd found her hours later, unconscious but unharmed, lying beside the stream. Her dog, usually skittish, was nowhere to be seen, but she had sworn, just before she lost consciousness, that she had seen something large and brown crouched nearby. A bear. Watching her, not attacking, just watching. She had told no one. No one would have believed her anyway. And then there was the birth. The snowstorm that swept in on the night Eli was born was the worst in 20 years. Roads were impassable. The midwives never made it. Her husband was out trying to get help, leaving her alone in the cabin as the contractions hit fast and hard. When he returned hours later, expecting the worst, he found her holding a perfectly healthy newborn in her arms. The fire was lit. The baby was swaddled, and, oddly, warm to the touch, almost as if he hadn't been born in the cold at all. The dog, usually protective, had a long scratch across his back. Deep, but clean. They never figured out how that happened. Now, standing by the river, holding Eli close to her chest, the pieces clicked together like a lock turning open. The bear, the one from the forest, the one from her memory, the one that had stared at her belly like it understood what was inside. It had been there before Eli. And now, Eli had come back for it. The villagers kept their distance. Even Marco, brave as he was, shook his head. It's dying. Let nature take it. But the baby was wriggling again, turning in her arms, reaching for the beast like it was an old friend. His hand stretched out, trembling with effort. The mother's eyes filled again, not just with fear, but with something deeper. Recognition. She slowly knelt down, bringing Eli closer to the bear's side. The creature lay gasping, flanks rising and falling, but its eyes turned toward them. The baby touched the bear's paw. A silence settled over the entire forest. No one spoke. No one breathed. The rain began to lighten, and for the first time since the storm began, the wind slowed to a whisper. The rain had finally slowed to a mist, leaving the forest coated in silver. But tension hung in the air, heavier than the fog. What had just happened defied reason, yet no one could look away. The baby still had his tiny hand on the bear's massive paw, sitting peacefully beside the slumped body like a guardian, or maybe a reunited friend. But the silence shattered with a sharp voice. "This can't go on. That bear is dangerous," said Halberd, the town's security head. "It attacked something or someone, and now it's here, weak or not. We can't take risks." "We need to call it in," added another villager. "Tranquilizers. The ranger station should have been alerted the moment it was spotted." Marco stepped forward, still damp from the rescue. "You all saw what happened. That bear didn't attack anyone. It could have, but it didn't. Yet." That single word changed the atmosphere. It turned fear into urgency. Phones buzzed, calls were made, and within the hour, a forestry truck pulled up along the trail, headlights piercing through the thinning mist. 2 uniformed officials stepped out, rifles over shoulders, tranquilizer guns at the ready. A vet followed close behind, unsure whether she'd be treating or preparing for containment. But as they approached, something strange happened. The baby, Eli, began to cry. At first, it was just a soft whimper, then a louder wail, then sobbing so intense it echoed off the trees. His mother tried to lift him, but he flailed, reaching back toward the bear, arms outstretched, tiny fists shaking in protest. "He doesn't want to leave him," she whispered. The rangers slowed. One of them raised the gun. "No!" The mother stepped in front of them, arms shielding both her baby and the fallen bear. "You can't. Please, listen." She spoke, voice trembling, but her words carried weight. She told them about the winter storm, the isolated cabin, her collapse in the forest before her son was born, the eyes in the trees, the warmth in the room, the scratch marks on the dog. Every buried memory she had locked away suddenly spilled like floodwater. She pointed at the bear, tears in her voice. That creature, he was there, watching me, protecting me. I don't know how or why, but I'm telling you, this isn't just an animal. A beat passed. Then the older of the two rangers lowered his weapon slightly. Behind them, the vet stepped forward and crouched beside the bear. There's severe trauma to the front limb, bullet fragment in the bone. This injury is weeks old. He's been suffering a long time. Another voice chimed in from the gathering crowd, gravelly, calm, and full of recognition. Snowpaw. Everyone turned. An elderly man with a cane stood at the edge of the circle. He wore a faded green jacket bearing the wildlife emblem, a retired rescuer named Abram. I'd know that coat anywhere, he muttered, nodding toward the bear's matted fur. White patch under the jaw. That's Snowpaw. He hobbled forward as people murmured in confusion. That bear was known across half the mountain range 5 years ago. Got shot trying to save his cubs from poachers. Disappeared after that. Everyone thought he was dead. Abram crouched painfully. I saw him once. He had a gentleness most animals never show. But he's still wild, one man protested. Abram didn't look up. And we're still human. What does that say about us if we kill something for showing mercy? The vet examined the wound again and turned to the rangers. If you'll allow it, I can treat him, but I'll need help. Marco and the mother both stepped forward. We'll stay. The baby had gone quiet again, now resting his head gently against the bear's shoulder like he was keeping vigil. I'll help, too, said Abram. The tranquilizers were lowered. The bear's breathing was shallow but steady. As the vet worked carefully, cleaning, stitching, checking vitals, the baby refused to move. Any time someone got too close or too abrupt, he would tense or cry. It was as if he could feel the bear's pain. All the while, the forest seemed to hold its breath again, and far behind that still body, somewhere within, flickered the past. In the recesses of memory, the bear saw her. The woman in the forest, pregnant and collapsed near the icy stream. He had approached slowly that day, drawn by a scent he didn't recognize at first, but something inside told him not to walk away. She was fragile, and something was alive inside her. He had paced beside her, keeping the wolves away. He had sat through the cold night as her breathing steadied, and when humans approached, he vanished into the woods again. But he returned, again and again, in secret, following the strange scent, the same one that now pulsed from the child by his side. That scent had stayed in his mind like a carved symbol, even after the poacher's bullet, even after he lost everything. He had wandered broken, but when he smelled the child's presence near the riverbank earlier that day, something inside him surged. He had fought the current, not just for his life, but for the baby's. Back in the present, the vet wrapped the last bandage and stepped away. The bear was stable, for now. The sedative had been unnecessary. No one spoke, no one dared. Then, slowly, the bear's eyes fluttered open. The baby stirred. The bear's gaze found him instantly, and what followed was not a growl. It was a low rumble, deep, steady, vibrating through the ground. It wasn't a threat. It was something else. Gratitude. Eli leaned forward and placed his head gently on the bear's side once again. No one said a word. Not even the rangers. They simply watched, hearts torn between awe and disbelief. What had once been a wild animal lying at death's edge now looked like a guardian finally reunited with his ward. And in the child's eyes, shining with unexplainable calm, was something not even the storm could shake. The rain had stopped. The storm that once raged with fury now left behind a forest washed clean, drenched in stillness and something else. Reverence. At the river's edge, no one moved for a long time. The villagers who once called for the bear's removal stood silently, their anger drowned beneath the tide of what they had witnessed. Some wiped tears from their faces without realizing. Even the hard-headed security chief lowered his eyes. They had expected a monster. But instead they saw a guardian, a protector, a creature not unlike themselves, capable of pain, love, memory, and mercy. The baby, Eli, remained curled beside the great bear, now swaddled in thick bandages. As the vet confirmed the bear's stabilized condition, a decision was made. Not to destroy, not to exile, but to heal. Snowpaw would be moved to a nearby wildlife sanctuary. Not far, just outside the forest's edge where human hands could care for him, and where the baby, if he wished, could visit. Preparations began the next morning. The mother, holding Eli close, watched as forest workers built a custom transport. Extra wide, soft inside, no chains. When the moment came, and the bear was gently lifted, something extraordinary happened. The baby reached out. Snowpaw, barely awake, turned his head. Their eyes locked one final time before departure, and then, slowly, with effort, the great bear extended his snout toward the boy. A soft nudge, a touch that lingered. It wasn't a farewell filled with pain. It was one filled with peace, the kind of farewell that knew it wasn't truly goodbye. As the vehicle rolled away, villagers watched in silence. They had gathered again, not to protest this time, but to wave, and many of them wept. Months passed. Winter gave way to spring, and the forest bloomed again. Trees burst with green. Rivers flowed calmly, and the scars left by the storm began to fade. So did the memory of fear. But one memory didn't fade. In the town square, a new mural had appeared, painted on the side of the old ranger station. It showed a bear in the river, a baby on the shore, and between them, a shared beam of light. Below it read, "Trust can bloom even between silence and claws." At the heart of this healing was Eli. Now walking steadily, his curly hair bouncing with every step, he laughed as he approached the wildlife sanctuary's glass viewing platform. His small hands pressed against the reinforced window as he searched the enclosure with eager eyes. "Snowpaw," he chirped. The crowd of onlookers had grown over the past weeks. News of the baby who saved a bear had spread farther than anyone expected. Journalists came. Educators arrived, and soon a community initiative was born. The Forest Friendship Program. Its purpose, to teach the youngest generation not to fear the wild, but to understand it. Children would be taught to respect animals, not as enemies, but as neighbors. Guided hikes replaced hunting trips. Art classes replaced fear talks. Even old skeptics began to change their tone. One father who once demanded Snowpaw be shot now stood beside his daughter as she dropped a handmade paper bear into a thank you box. But on this particular day, Eli's second visit, something felt different. The sanctuary had been carefully monitoring Snowpaw's recovery. The bullet wound that had plagued him was now fully healed. His gait was strong again. His fur, once matted with blood, now shone with renewed vitality. Yet his behavior remained unusual for a bear. Whenever Eli visited, Snowpaw would rise from his den and approach the glass quietly, never roaring, never pacing, just watching. Today was no different. As Eli toddled forward and reached out his tiny hand, Snowpaw emerged from the shaded grove of his enclosure. Slowly, with a grace too deliberate to be coincidence, he walked to the edge and stopped in front of the boy. The child pressed his palm flat against the glass. Snowpaw lifted his massive paw and mirrored the motion, one on each side of the clear wall, the same place, the same shape. Gasps rippled through the onlookers. Someone sobbed. The glass seemed to hum with something unspoken, something only they could understand. A silent echo of the river's edge. The boy smiled. Not the innocent smile of a toddler unaware, but something deeper, like he knew this was a bond that wouldn't break, even with worlds between them. As the moment lingered, the mother stepped back, hand over her heart. Her eyes shimmered with tears, not of sorrow, but awe. A ranger leaned over and said, "You still believe he was there the night Eli was born?" She nodded slowly. "I don't just believe it, I know it." The ranger said nothing. He didn't need to. Behind them, Abram, now a regular volunteer at the sanctuary, watched with folded arms. "I've spent 40 years rescuing animals," he said, "but I've never seen anything like this. That boy isn't just a child, he's a bridge." The mother turned to look at her son again, and in that quiet moment as the wind stirred the grass and Snowpaw's rumble vibrated faintly through the enclosure walls, she whispered, "In a world where we fear the wild, maybe the wild was the one watching over us all along." The camera shutters clicked. The moment was captured, immortalized. But for those who were there, no photo could ever match the feeling, the truth of what they had seen. On the walk back from the sanctuary, Eli kept turning around, waving goodbye over and over. And though the bear never left his enclosure, the staff swore they saw him linger by the wall long after the family left, as if waiting just a little longer. That night, back in their quiet cabin near the river, the baby finally fell asleep, holding a small stuffed bear close to his chest. And far away, in his forest enclosure, Snowpaw lay beneath the stars, head turned gently toward the window. Two souls, still connected, across time, across storms, across species. Because sometimes the wild doesn't come to destroy, it comes to protect.